Hey everybody, with these next sets of screencasts, what we're going to be doing is focusing on the development of the 13 colonies here in what becomes the United States. So we're going to start first with Jamestown, which eventually does become the first permanent English settlement. Remember, the British tried once before with the colony of Roanoke, what we refer to as the Lost Colony, right? But that didn't pan out so well. They still did have that area of Virginia that Sir Walter Raleigh was able to acquire. So Virginia still belonged to the British, and they decided to go at it again, right, and try to establish a colony here in the Americas. So the Virginia Company, it was a joint stock company, was established. They were given a charter to try and have a go at it again and create a new colony here. So in 1607, men with the Virginia Company came over to the Americas to try and establish their colony here in North America. About 125 settlers. Most of them were adventurers, most of them were explorers. Not a large variety of them that came over were really men who were equipped to really establish themselves in a colony. Most of them came for this idea of searching for gold, and that's mostly what they focused on, which made development in Jamestown early on pretty difficult. Right? So really we can kind of consider Jamestown the colony that almost wasn't, in a sense. And that's because when they first came over, there were a few mistakes that they kind of made. Right? They settled near the river, which they called the James River in honor of James the First. But the water was very dirty and undrinkable. So even though they were near the river, it wasn't really water that they could use. So that proved to be a problem to the colonists. The area of Jamestown was bitterly cold in the winter, right? The summers were very humid. That also meant it was full of mosquitoes, and a lot of them disease-carrying mosquitoes. So that made a lot of the colonists sick. And the settlers mostly focused on gold rather than trying to establish the colony in what you need first, which is like building houses and planting food and kind of preparing yourself for the long term. They didn't really think about that, and they focused mostly on just going around trying to see if they could strike it rich with gold. So in order to get this colony up and running, trying to kind of whip everybody into shape, that's where Captain John Smith comes in. John Smith took charge of Jamestown in 1608, right, and quickly changed the policy in which if you didn't work, you didn't get food, right? It was a work or starve policy. So everybody had to pitch in to try and make this colony work. So he forced people to plant and to build fortresses and walls, homes, plant crops, and really start to establish a settled colony is what they were working for. He also established relationships with the nearby Native Americans, which were known as the Powhatan Confederacy. And with that, it also brought them more knowledge and allies as to getting by in this territory that was still very foreign to them. Now, John Smith, though, ends up having to return to England because of an injury. And when this happens, things kind of change in the colony. By the time that John Smith leaves to England, the Jamestown colony began to grow. So more people began to come over. In 1609, you had about 400 settlers, which now included women and children, right? People were bringing their families now and trying to make this colony grow. However, a large epidemic of disease and famine, right, meaning that there was a time where they weren't able to get much food was not growing, spread throughout the colony, and many people began to die. Really only about 60 of those 400 settlers survived the winter. Because of what was going on in Jamestown, England decided to send a new governor, a new leader to the colony, and that was Lord Delaware, who came over as the new governor and tried to reestablish and help Jamestown grow again. And if you notice, right, Delaware, that's where we get Delaware from. It's actually named after Lord Delaware, who came over to Jamestown. John Wolfe is also another very important person in the development of Jamestown. He was a settler, and he was successful at first cultivating tobacco, which becomes then a huge cash crop for Jamestown and the rest of Virginia as the colonies develop. He married Pocahontas, which was the chief's daughter of the Powhatan Confederacy, and that really did serve to kind of improve the relationship between the British and the Native Americans temporarily, because we will see after a while the relationship between these two groups is going to grow a little bit more tense, and it will cause conflicts between the two as Virginia, as a colony, continues to grow. So that overall is kind of a summary of how Jamestown developed early on. In our next screencast, we're going to take a look at how from Jamestown, Virginia as a colony continued to expand and to grow.